Green interwebs and grand. Oh my god, don't break that ice. You foolish dragons, just doom us. Oh my god. We are so screwed. Greeting interwebs and grandchildren, this is Jackit and welcome to another edition of Let's Play Golden Sun The Lost Age. In the last episode, we made it to the depths of the Mars Lighthouse and there's dragons frozen in ice. Foolishly, we cracked the ice. And it seems like there's only one clear thing to do now, even though it's probably a terrible idea to do. The ice is just so waiting to be blown up. It's perfectly cracked to the nth degree, waiting for our explosion to bust it open. You know you can't progress through the game without it. So I guess the best thing we can do is to at least prepare before the inevitable doom and destruction that's bound to come along our way. So it's time for the good old tradition of showing off everything I can about my party setup before the boss fight. As you can see, by coincidence or not, I have the Hero's Veil in the front of the party. I don't think it was purely coincidence, but it's not just for style either. You'll see what I'm planning with these party members when the fight actually starts. And as you can see by the classes, I'm going to be focusing more on the water element than usual. Okay, all there is to do is blow it up, Jenna. Could possibly go wrong. Oh, well, you know, the dragons are still alive. Joy. So these are the flame dragons. If you take a look at their bio real quick, they seem kind of familiar, so I'm not going to really go over much of their techniques. I'll just go over what I do to fight against them in the battle itself. In fact, the only move on here that doesn't look completely familiar is the Flame Breath, and it's just a standard fire-based monster power, if I recall. So there's not even anything too remarkable about that. While I don't find this fight too difficult compared to the optional bosses we were just facing in previous videos, your life will be made easier if you decide to focus on one dragon before taking on the other. Me personally, I decided to go more towards the smaller one. It just has a more annoying set of moves. It has that Djinn fest that we faced before. It can heal both dragons. It's just my preferred choice of dealing death too. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that's the first time I've ever shown off Asaidi, which I'm pretty sure I'm butchering the pronunciation of horribly. Pretty awesome move, isn't it? It's the upgrade of Dragon Rock, and it certainly shows. There's that Djinn Fest in action. Yeah, this is a pretty familiar move. Okay, no more. Now, I'd just like to take this moment to point out that in the Mars Lighthouse, Garrett and Jenna will recover synergy points, as well as the dragons. It's just like in the Venus Lighthouse, Jupiter, and Mercury, with Isaac and Mia recovering synergy points in their respective Elemental Lighthouse in the first game, and Shabia recovering synergy points in the Jupiter Lighthouse. Now this is something worth keeping in mind for fights in general in the Mars Lighthouse, not just this boss fight. Quick note, the Djinns like Petra are pretty useful in this fight, especially if you're going to be going after the smaller dragon first, because the larger dragon does have devastating attacks, and is more threatening in an offensive standpoint than the smaller dragon. So that's just my personal preference to focus those sorts of Djinns on him and go after the smaller dragon. In case it's clear already, Mars Adepts aren't going to be doing much offensive damage to dragons because they resist fire, which is partly why I went out of my way to change Jenna's class into something that gives her more water-based synergy. Because I want to take advantage of the fact that she gets free synergy point recovery. Gary I kind of put in a supportive position anyways for some odd reason, so that's his way of recovering synergy points. If you don't mind investing in the Djinns, water summons are always recommended for fighting against fire-based foes. The summons are real useful because they attack both enemies and do a pretty large amount of damage, unlike some of the water synergy, which does not really do as much damage as a summon. As you can see here, I'm continuing to devastate the large dragon so it can't harm me with powerful attacks. Any summons I have will harm both of them, but I put the focus on the smaller dragon. Both with summons and with attacks that only harm one target. As you can see, I'm starting to get a little more creative, because I believe I'm going for more than just the Bossy summon. I'm trying to mix it up. Maybe we'll get a Zool in here eventually, because that would be a good water summon to unleash upon the foe. So Isaac is there for the attacking, Garrett is for supporting and attacking when a guy like him shouldn't be supporting. Jenna is there for healing as well as unleashing water-based powers like upon it. And Felix is also there for water-based powers, but not as much of a supportive guy. This turn is going to be a good example of why you want to keep the large dragon at bay as much as possible. If you don't mind the healing and the Djinn Fest, you might actually want to go after him first. I get the feeling I was starting to take out the smaller dragon pretty soon, so that's the reason I attacked the larger guy. But yeah, his signature moves can be pretty devastating. If you've been paying note to the environment of this fight, it's really put well together. I think the music just fits the theme of the battle real well, and the artists that make the battle scenes for this game are always doing a good job. Like I mentioned in the last boss fight, I believe, the game's just pretty beautifully put together all around. Especially for a game that's all sprites. This was before 3D models were really introduced into handhelds. The music really fits the mood for this fight, and just the whole fight in general has a really big impact on the story, though I can't really say why until the battle's over. You might already be able to get a guess of what's going on though. I think overall, the Mars Lighthouse is a really well made dungeon. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, just because I never really thought about what my favorite dungeon of Golden Sun or Golden Sun The Lost Age is. But considering it's the last dungeon of the game, they really do a good job being creative with the puzzles. The fights that you have to go through are tense. The plot's well tied into the events that you take place in. I mean, honestly, the beginning part has been a bit confusing. But I think later on in the Mars Lighthouse, it's really going to get interesting. I think my favorite part of this lighthouse is yet to come. Though the dungeon isn't really more challenging after this. In fact, if anything, I think it's a little easier to navigate. But just between the environment that the last section of this lighthouse has, and the fact that you don't really get lost in it, but you're still challenged with the puzzles, it's still really good. I swear I've seen that synergy before. Is it a synergy? A move like that coming from a dragon looks like a monster skill, but I swear I've seen it use as synergy before. Anyways, it's time. Oh boy, it's time to unleash the big baby into this dragon baby. Who's gonna be doing it? Felix is gonna be doing it. Yes, the Azul Summon. Unleashed on a fire dragon. This is gonna end great. For me. With the power that's gonna be unleashed, I highly doubt everyone's gonna be standing at the end of this turn. Oh yeah, that monster can use the break synergy. It's almost as annoying as healing, especially if you're relying on getting your defense and resistance up. But as I predicted, that dragon just couldn't handle the power of Azul. Then again, we've kind of been beating upon it for a while. Highly doubt it's going to survive much longer. Now this turn, I took surprisingly long to make the moves for my party. I guess I was considering bringing in someone else just to spice up the action. Oh, we bring someone else in eventually, but I probably could go for the rest of this fight with the 4 party members that are out and not have any worries. Just figured I would point that much out. Kinda just trying to use up all my summons, get as much damage upon him as possible, because now that it's just down to 1 dragon, there's not really much to fear anymore. And that frickin' cage! I swear I've seen it somewhere, and I swear that back then it was completely pointless as well. And I almost wanted to see it happen someone just so we could see what it actually did. Yeah, right about here is where I bring Mia in. Just to get a little more water synergy attacks upon him to make the fight go by a bit quicker, because there's no need to worry about difficulty anymore. In fact, I will tell you right now, the only thing Isaac's going to be doing for the rest of this battle is using that society. I hope you like the giant swords and don't get sick of giant swords quickly, because otherwise the rest of this battle will be a bit of a disappointment to you. And the rest of my party isn't really going to be doing much else. It might actually be a good idea to cut this out, but... Oh look, Mia did protect. I guess there's reason to keep some of this still in. I probably don't need a defense and resistance boost at this point, considering it's down to 1 dragon. Then again, you can never be too careful in a boss fight. If you have the opportunity to heal and get your defenses up, why not? The worst thing that could happen is to be almost done with a fight and then lose it at the very end. Oh, I don't see the dragon use that move at all during the fight. It almost would be like going into a desperate phase, except I'm next to certain that the likelihood of it doing certain attacks doesn't change after one of the dragons has been defeated, which would have been a nice touch for the game, to be perfectly honest. A lot of bosses these days would have like a desperate mode, but I don't think any bosses in Golden Sun do that, even when you're facing off against 2 foes. I think that would be a good way to actually force the players to consider who they take out. Like, I'm pretty sure Super Mario RPG does this in one boss fight, where there's 2 enemies and you defeat one, and depending on which one you defeat first, it actually changes who you end up fighting for the second phase. But here it's just the same no matter who you take out, so you're just only gonna take out whichever one you feel is a bigger threat first. Or if you're really undecisive and haven't gotten any advice, you would go after both. But then again, I still recommend focusing on one than taking out the other. Makes it so much easier in the end. Well, I'm thinking more bosses could benefit from that sort of thing, to be honest. Cause like a lot of RPGs, you can put all the strategy into it you want, but if you raise your levels high enough, do enough grinding in any sort of turn-based RPG, the majority of times you can get through battles without having to think too much. And I'll admit that's kind of a flaw of RPGs. Something action RPGs kinda do a bit better in my eyes. Though in my eyes, a good RPG that has turn-based and random battles, they won't bother you too much if you don't fight enough. But if you fight everything you come across, you won't be over-leveled. Story going along with this whole sinking thing. Back when I was a kid, because I was a kid, I didn't really think as much about Golden Sun as I do today. So I guess that's why fights were a little bit harder on me, because I didn't have as much strategizing as I do now. I mean, all the options you have in this game, all the arrangements of your Djinns, the classes you can have, there's a lot to think about if you actually put the time into it. It can be a bit overwhelming. And I'm going to point out this turn because it's awesome. Invisible Jenna slays the dragon. Of course, we have to end this battle in the most awesome note possible. Jenna would not have it any other way. You who hold star, open your heart and listen. If you wish to reach the heavens, give your star to me. And that's actually what I like about this fight. Not the challenge, not the uniqueness, because it doesn't really have either of those. But it plays a major role in the story, it just has a role of tragedy. You kind of get the feeling that it's Gato and Cards as you're fighting along and you see how similar their moves are, but you really don't get the full picture until after the fight. Even if you do catch on, you have to fight in order to survive. So the state they're in is inevitable, yet you feel like you played a responsible role in their death. Or at least the state that they're in. I suppose it's not officially confirmed if they ever die, but they pretty much are dying, so the same feeling of guilt is still there. And I suppose there's a little irony in it all, considering how much of a jerk they've been. The game pits them as antagonists, yet by the time you get to the Mars Lighthouse, going through procs, their actions feel justified. You understand the pain that they're going through, and how they just want to save their village no matter the cost, no matter what actions they have to take. Same could be said about Sedosa and Merdani. Some will argue that their actions still aren't justified. That they may have had a good cause, but the extremes they went to achieve it weren't necessary, justifying their roles as antagonists. To me, I see a way to make a villain more than just a one-dimensional villain. I think things like this make the Golden Sun story so enjoyable for me. The characters may not change much, they may not develop as you go through the story, but at the same time, they're not always what meets the eye. Your perspective on them can change as you go through the story. Maybe I'm just making that a little more extreme because Carson and Galan are the best examples of it. Other characters of the game I just like because they weren't that bad to start off with, and it's how well the plot of this game is put together that really makes the story strong. If anything, the characters just add on to it. The game might be a little bit better if a couple characters were to develop, but I think the story of the game is strong enough as is. Sorry for going on a really long tangent, but I couldn't talk about this during the fight, because that would spoil it, and the last thing I want to do is ruin the experience that I had playing for the game for people who've never seen the game before. Yeah, I couldn't just ignore it altogether. This is a really strong point in the game. I think even a reason why I still like the game today. Not too many of the games I played had an experience like this, where I actually can sympathize with the villains. Keep in mind that before Golden Sun, I'm pretty sure most of the games I played were of the standard Nintendo formula of, oh, here's a big giant bad guy that's doing bad things, go beat him, hero! And yet this game kinda had a little bit more than just defeat the villains. You're not really fighting against anyone, you're fighting towards a goal. So that's it. In the next episode of Let's Play Golden Sun: The Lost Age, we will give the Mars Star to that dragon, hopefully to progress to the beginning of the Mars Lighthouse. Until then though, see y'all later.